So this is the Ghost, which is a board that's been one of our more popular models in the last year and a half. And one of the reasons for that is that it works so well for such a wide variety of people, and also different levels of surfers, and also different types of waves. It's basically got a nice round tail, pulled in quite a bit but still round, and it's got a wider front end of it. The front half of the board has the width kind of pushed up a little bit forward, and as well with that it has the thickness is actually pushed up too. So what you have is a really nice stable area for paddling. It's got lower entry rocker in the front half of the board, so it paddles really fast, feels really easy to catch waves, gets into waves easy, and it also carries a lot of speed. When you have your weight on your front foot, it's not bogging because it's too thin and rockered out. It's getting you a lot of drive off your front foot. As you go back into the board here, it foils out from the center back and gets a lot thinner through the tail. And it also has a very thin, or not thin, but relatively thin rail compared to the thickness overall. So it has a real sensitive feel to it. Even though it's got a lot of paddle power, it rides kind of thin for its thickness. So it gives you the advantages of like glide, paddling power, glide on a wave, speed, easy speed, and the sensitivity that you usually only get from a thinner board, which doesn't have all the other good parts. It has a lot of curve through the back end of the board in the tail rocker and in the outline where it's pulled in. And that allows you, as you get drive off the front of the board, as you step back through a turn or into like the pocket, it has a lot of curve that allows you to do tighter turns, easier, like it releases pressure through that rocker. You can do a tight turning, like a real tight radius turns. You can really push and hold, the rail will hold really well. It's a thin tail, and it's gonna really have a lot of bite in the wave, so you won't slide out. You can push really hard on through your turns, so that even allows even a tighter turn by being able to push without worrying about it sliding out or giving way. It's been something that people always tell me, like in the shoulder high to above range, it's a really, really versatile board that they really like, all the way up to even double overhead waves, depending on how big and thick your board is. And one of my favorite things that I hear from a lot of people about it is that it has a really wide sweet spot. In other words, you don't have to have your feet in the exact perfect position, or you can actually ride it from a little different, shifting forward to get a little more drive, shifting back to turn, and it still feels good. It doesn't feel like you're bogging with your weight one way or the other. It kind of has a nice spread out sweet spot. It's been the board that Jon's been riding almost exclusively in the past year, and it's what he did win the 2017 world title riding this board the whole time. One of the breakout performances I thought of that year was in Margaret River. He was riding the 6.2, which was the first board I made him of this design, and his surfing was just, it almost looked like he was snowboarding in bigger surf. At the same time, he rode the same design as a 6.0 made out of epoxy EPS, an epoxy lighter, to third place at trestles in waves this big. So the versatility with the board is really obvious, and you don't have to be Jon Florence to have it work for you. From everybody that I talk with, they're pretty happy, from just like the most average guy to really, the top surfers. So it's just been a great board for everybody. The bottom curve of the Ghost is basically, it has a flatter entry rocker that curves back in through a really long and pretty significant tail curve. So what you get out of that is a lot of drive off the front end of the board, and that coupled with a wider nose, which straightens out the middle of the outline, gives you a ton of drive off your front foot as you're trying to, that's where you push off of to get speed. You get a lot of squirt from that parallel outline, and also the flatter entry rocker. Then at the same time, the outline pulls in through the tail, and the curve through the tail is significant. It's a real even, long curve, but it has a lot of curve in it, and so that allows easy turning and real like sensitive feeling adjustments. The bottom of the board has concave through from about the 12-inch mark in the nose all the way back through the fins, but within that single concave also sits a little bit of a double concave. In other words, it's a single but with a little bit of a hump in the middle, and that breaks up the bottom into two halves and allows it to tip rail to rail really easily at speed. When you have a single concave without the double at all, that can get a little sticky when you're going really fast. So this board helps to split that in half and gives you even more control and ease of rolling onto the rail. As it goes through the fins, that flattens out, and then it turns into just a little bit of, it flattens out at the back fin, and then a little bit of baby V going off the very end of the tail. It's pretty insignificant, but it's still the same thing at speed. On a bigger wave especially, it allows you to tip up onto that rail. Sometimes if you have too much concave through that, your board's going to lay flat in the water through a turn. You'll see a guy go partway through the turn and then the board's flatten out. This board hopefully is going to help you to maintain that rail and keep it through that whole turn and be without having to change what you're doing. With the Ghost, the way the outline is with a little wider nose and more parallel through the center of the board, you can actually ride it either like your own height for a normal board, or if you go a little bit longer for like a step-up board, but it rides slightly longer than it really is because of that parallelness in the outline. And then as far as the thickness goes, I usually recommend people go a bit thicker than they would on their normal board because the rail's really thinner compared to the center, and it has a very foiled out back half of the board. So you can get away with actually more volume than you would ride on your everyday short board without it feeling that way. It basically rides slightly longer and slightly thinner than the actual dimensions, it seems like.